Hello and welcome to Perspective. I am JAWAD. TEHAMI. On March the 9th, 2022, India fired a supersonic flying object that landed into Pakistan's territory. DGISPR Major General Babar Iftikhar briefed the media about the incident and said that it showed India's disregard for aviation safety and reflected very poorly on their technological prowess and procedural efficiency. And Pakistan's Foreign Office summoned Indian charge d'affaires to lodge a strong protest over the incident. Later on, Indian Defense Ministry came up with an explanation 2 days after the said incident, and it said that it was regrettable and it happened due to a technical malfunction, and the High Court of Inquiry has been launched into this. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi expressed concern over this incident and urged the international community and the concerned aviation bodies to take the notice of the incident. Pakistan's National Security Advisor Dr. Moeed Yusuf also said that it raises serious questions about the safety and the security of the weapons systems of India, and there should be a joint probe, and China supported Pakistan's demand of a joint probe into the incident. And to delve deeper into this particular thing, we are today joined in the studio by Mr. Air Vice Marshal Retired, Mr. Ijaz Malik, who is a senior analyst. Thank you very much for being at Perspective today. So talking about India's explanation, what do you think? Was it sufficient and satisfactory?
Thank you very much. Obviously, it's not, because this blatant act, it had created a scenario where we need to address so many basic issues. But before I do that, taking the advantage of my presence on your channel, I would like to commend and pay my tributes to the unsung heroes of Pakistan air defense system, who remain deployed around the year and who perform their duties 24/7 from remote locations and under very harsh and unhospitable environment, given our terrain and diversity of the climatic conditions. So these are the people who create a wall of or a barrier to create a response. So I think they need to be given applaud nationwide. Unfortunately, we have not been able to acknowledge, because our media was busy in internal domestic politics. So this issue did not get that kind of limelight as it deserved. Now, coming over to your question, this projectile or missile, the explanation given by India is not acceptable by any standards. First of all, we need to address the issue that with this trajectory, it jeopardized and put the lives of hundreds of passengers on board the flights which were operating in the air corridors which it crossed at almost same level or closer to the levels, because normally the flights which are transiting north-south in Pakistan air corridors, they operate close to 40,000 feet. So this projectile also crossed in very close vicinity of that altitude bracket. So it had not only put the lives of those people, but then again, it has raised a question for ICAO, the international agency which is responsible for the safety of passengers all over the world. They should also question this irresponsible act of India. Secondly, as you mentioned about the statement of DG ISPR, his observations were very valid and pertinent. Once he said that it causes a question mark on the technological prowess of Indians who are engaged in development and production and again command and control system of these strategic weapons. So again, India needs to give an explanation not only to us but to the world at large, because if we would have, or in any future such situation, because such situation demand a response. We created a response, but our response, because of our state policy of strategic restraint, our response was just in the tactical domain, but actually it warrants a response in strategic domain, and the response created in strategic domain, it should be well understood by your viewers that it is not only disastrous for the two warring nations, but it will engulf the entire region into something which the survivors would always regret.
So, Mr. Malik, it actually raises serious questions about the safety and the security of the strategic weapon systems that India has. Pakistan's National Security Advisor, Dr. Mueed Yusuf, alluded to that fact, and he urged the international community to take the notice of this one. And he also said that India acted irresponsibly after this inadvertent missile fire. They didn't even bother to inform Pakistan, and this makes the whole situation even more worrisome.
This even this connotation of inadvertent firing, it needs to be revisited in my opinion, because such assets are supposed to have a robust command and control system, and in the decision making loop there is an entire sequence of actions which ultimately permits such action on the part of the operator. So it couldn't be possibly an inadvertent, but yes, the explanation of a technological malfunction that does exist. But then there is another question, that all such projectiles or missile systems, they have a self-destruction mechanism. So during this course of its trajectory, why that system failed to be put in place or failed to be initiated. So that again is a question. And I would also like to highlight another angle, that if you recall, Western media, particularly the Americans, they have been harping on the tune of Pakistani strategic assets, going into the hands of non-state actors, and causing doubts about our robust physical security of those assets. But now, shouldn't the question be asked to Indians, that if this was an act of some rogue element in their command and control system, or somebody was just trying to escalate already a very volatile and tense environment of two nuclear armed nations?
Oh, but a similar sort of statements. There was a response from the U.S. State Department spokesperson, Mr. Ned Price, and in his statement, he acted very indifferently, and he said that the Indian Defense Ministry should be consulted and contacted for the follow-up on this incident, and that shows that Americans are not willing to take this matter seriously. Don't you think it shows the deliberate indifference on the part of the American authorities?
Obviously, it highlights something which has been coming up time and again in our checkered history, because it shows and reflects vividly the double standards that Western media and the people in the capitals of West, particularly the United States, they have about this region. They would always give a tacit approval of whatever India does, because they want to build India, they want to project India as a regional power in their overall policy of containment of China, and that gives a blank check to Indians to do whatever they want. And particularly with this present regime, which is extremely unstable, and who is not rational in their thinking, and who are working on the agenda of Hindutva, you can expect anything from them, because if they have this tacit approval of the superpowers, they can. We should always be on safeguards to have any such misadventure coming up anytime. So.
Mr. Malik, there had been several incidents of illegal trade of uranium as well. When U.S. State Department spokesperson Mr. Ned Price was asked about this particular aspect, he responded in a way that he was not familiar with that particular incident. Do you think that the Americans could be oblivious of this sensitivity as well?
Yes, obviously, because again, just go back a couple of years back, their support for India joining the nuclear supplier group, and India getting the nuclear civil technology, and Pakistan, which was suffering at that time from a huge energy crisis, and it was in a desperate need of such relief, and we were the allies of NATO and Americans and fighting their war in this region. They never gave us any such relaxation.
Okay, when we talk about the outcome of the inquiry, as Indian Defence Ministry has said that High Court of Inquiry has been launched into this particular incident, given the fact, as we have seen in the past, about the Indian justice system, do you think after this High Court of Inquiry, the real reason behind this incident would be brought to light?
I think mere technical or operational level inquiry would not suffice such challenging issue. And given all the dictums of international laws, all stakeholders' interest should be taken care of in any such inquiry. So I would demand that Pakistan must pursue with the concerned agencies the world over, United Nations, ICAO, that there should be an inquiry formed under the umbrella of United Nations Security Council, and there should be a representation from ICAO headquarters and Pakistan Civil Aviation, Pakistan Air Defense System, and of course their counterpart from India, and diplomatic participation. So that wholesome composition of the joint inquiry, probably that should be able to highlight those weak links which are causing doubt, and in future also safety and security of people who are flying very close to international border. Our corridors run very close, about a minute and a half to 2 minutes time maximum. There are the international corridors in which all international airlines are flying. So such misadventure is fraught with chances of jeopardizing the airspace management and the very basic safety of the air passengers.
So China has supported Pakistan's demand of a joint probe into this incident. After China putting in weight behind Pakistan's demand, do you think India would let that happen? Or China could play a role as a P5 country at the UN Security Council in order to impress upon India to make this joint probe happen?
Regardless of what India does, because I don't expect any sane or any responsible follow-up action from New Delhi, but we must pursue our options, and we must keep putting this pressure in all concerned quarters, because as I mentioned earlier, at the cost of repetition, I would say again that it's not only an issue between two nations and which are nuclearly armed, but this is an issue of the safety of people who are flying in this airspace. So I think it should be taken in that larger regional and global perspective.
Okay, when we talk about the safety and the security of the passengers which are flying through the passenger planes, don't you think that the Indian public should also ask their authorities and hold them accountable for this particular misfire that could have been detrimental to them as well, because it was not the other international flights which were on the path of this supersonic flying object, but one of India's plane was also in the direct path of this one, which was flying from Mumbai to Srinagar as well.
Exactly, because as I mentioned, the corridors are on both sides of the international border. So this initial flight path, it was crossing through on the north-south heading, and then it turned towards Pakistan. So it actually jeopardized the safety of both flying corridors.
Exactly. So in this situation, what happens to be the duty of the Indian public? Should there raise voice against their Indian authorities as well?
Yes, I think the sane element in Indian media and Indian civil society, they would raise their voice, but who bothers, given their history, if they are not bothered about the brutal killings every day in Indian illegally occupied Kashmir, which are physically happening, so will they bother about something which actually was very close to happening but didn't happen? So I think India would
Right.
go by their own style of managing such silly things.
Right, your point is well taken. So, talking about Dr. Mueed Yusuf's statement, and he said that the inquiry should be held in order to ascertain the real circumstances regarding this incident, whether it was an inadvertent or it was more of an intentional.
Yes, it cannot be established unless and until the neutral and independent board of inquiry has the access to the data of their command and control system, which unless one has access to that data, it cannot be established in real sense that what happened in the sequence prior to the launch.
So, what happens to be the future of Pakistan and India relation, given the facts that there have been certain incidents of submarines trying to infiltrate Pakistan's territorial waters, and then we saw this misfire of a supersonic flying object into Pakistan's territory. Pakistan has always been desirous of peace, especially with India, and it has always asked India to come on the negotiating table to resolve all the outstanding issues. So in these circumstances, Pakistan has again acted with restraint. Now, if such type of incidents recur, what options do you think Pakistan would have?
First of all, it highlighted the efficacy of our robust air defense system. Just for the consumption of your viewers, I would like to explain that the response by air defense system, it starts from the detection capability. So on that day, our air defense system had shown its capability to intercept a low RCS, which is radar cross-sectional area, because these missiles give very small amount of energy reflections given their design as compared to the large or wide body aircraft. So we had detected, we have tracked. So this detection and tracking are the prerequisite to intercept. Although that stage will come, but it's a commendable job. So India should be very careful after seeing our capability to detect such targets, and obviously after detection, given the rules of engagement, the option of destruction or interception, it remains open to us.
Air Vice Marshal retired Mr. Ijaz Malik, senior analyst, thank you very much for being with us at Perspective. We really appreciate your time, and as you discussed this particular thing, an international inquiry should be held into this incident. Why there was no information beforehand which was given to Pakistan if an inadvertent incident of that sort had happened, and the international community and the concerned aviation bodies should also take notice of this incident. Thank you very much once again for being with us on the show. And in the second segment, we'll discuss that Pakistan will be once again at the center of the global attention as it is going to host the 48th Organization of Islamic Countries Foreign Ministers Council, which is to be held on the 22nd and the 23rd of March. For that, please stay tuned. Welcome back to Perspective. I am JAWAD. Pakistan is going to be at the center of the global attention once again as it is going to host the 48th Council of Foreign Ministers of the OIC on the 22nd and 23rd of March. And the theme of this moot is partnering for unity, justice and development. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Pakistan would act as a bridge to promote unity among the Muslim countries. The moot will also address Islamophobia, the situation in Kashmir, the situation in Palestine, and the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan as well. And Pakistan has invited Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi as a guest of honor who will be speaking at this important moot as well. Comprehensive security arrangements have been put in place. To talk about the significance of this particular moot, I'm joined today by Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, who is a former ambassador in the studio. Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, thank you very much for being part of the show today. So talking specifically about the passing of the resolution at the United Nations General Assembly to combat Islamophobia. Of course, Islamophobia is going to be discussed in this moot as well. So given that fact, what happens to be the significance of this moot?
Well, first of all, this moot is being held in very challenging times. And in the background of the Ukraine-Russia crisis, I think the whole world will face certain very large challenges. There are very high chances of oil and gas prices going up, wheat prices rising, fertilizer for the next crop will be expensive. So that's one aspect of it. Everybody has to unite to be able to fight this oncoming problem. The other issue that you can draw from this conflict is the matter of double standards. You might have noticed that the sort of treatment that is being given to the Ukrainian refugees, and I agree that they should be given all assistance possible, but it differs a great deal from the assistance that was offered to Syrian refugees in Europe. Apart from that, if you remember, the conflict in Bosnia, for example, there were over 100,000 people killed. There was a genocide there before the Western world took any action. So the Islamic world has to realize this. And in that context, this moot is going to be very, very important. There are going to be about 100 resolutions that will hopefully be passed here. Now, when I say this, most of these resolutions have been discussed thoroughly, so it will be more or less a formality. But as far as Pakistan is concerned, the most important issue at this point is that of Afghanistan. Now, it is very, very important to see that Afghanistan, not only from a humanitarian point of view, but also from a political point of view, is not allowed to fail, and that there is no large humanitarian catastrophe there. One must realize that if the state fails, it will not only affect Pakistan by a larger influx of refugees. We must understand that in the Islamic world, there are players from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from Algeria, that are still there as non-state actors. So this is the interest that is common amongst the participants of this OIC conference.
Okay, Mr. Khan, as you just alluded to the fact that there are certain insurgent groups or the non-state actors which are still present on the Afghan soil. So the promise which was made by the Afghan Taliban in the Doha peace deal with the world powers, especially with the Americans, that they promised that the Afghan soil would not be used against any other countries, especially against the neighbors. So how do you think during this moot, the foreign ministers of the OIC countries can come together in order to think about a certain solution that could be given to the Afghan Taliban, that they could establish their writ on the Afghan soil and not let the insurgent groups of that sort operate from there?
Well, we have to stress to the Afghan government, the people that are in power, the Taliban government, that if we are to offer the assistance that we are going to, there are certain conditions, there are certain concerns that we have. And these concerns also include those of Russia and China. So they carry a lot of importance. And of course, it will be the job of all the participants to collectively try to convince the Afghan government on this.
So, Mr. Khan, given the fact that Afghanistan is going through a huge economic crisis, it has been war torn over the last 2 decades in particular, not 2 decades, but in fact for 4 decades, it has been seeing the horrors of war. So it is the economy of this country happens to be in shambles. Do you think for a government to operate fully and to establish its writ across nook and corner, it has to have a very solid foundation on the economic grounds?
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. If the present government were to fail, then there are many other people who are traditional opponents who might step in, and there might be a situation of great instability. And this is something that will affect the rest of the world.
So where do you think these funds are going to come from? I mean, do you think the Islamic countries, the Muslim countries have got that much of thing to offer to the Afghan Taliban in order so that they can establish their writ there, over there fully?
Absolutely. For a start, you see, we need to pressure other countries like the United States that are holding more than $7 billion worth of assets of the Afghan people to release this. And as far as your question about whether we have the capacity as a united body, we have more than enough money available. It is the will, and of course, after all the discussions upon the conditionalities that I described, we are totally capable of helping Afghanistan.
But there was another promise that was made by the Afghan Taliban in the Doha peace deal that the government, the future government would be inclusive. Do you think if the funding goes only into the hands of the Afghan Taliban, it would reduce the chances of an inclusive government over there?
No, not necessarily. I think the Taliban will understand that if their government is to be stable, that they do need to include all the other players in it. This has been stressed to them time and again by the international community.
So earlier, 3 months before, there was another OIC mood that was hosted by Pakistan, and now within this time span, this is the second mood which is being hosted by Pakistan. Of course, Afghanistan is going to be under discussion. Now, already there was a humanitarian fund which was established, and a special focal person was also appointed for that matter. So after having done that, what else do you think OIC countries could do about it?
Well, there's a great deal as far as Afghanistan is concerned. The immediate problem is that of humanitarian assistance. It is facing possible famine, and as a result of that, there not only is going to be instability, but influx of refugees into Pakistan and perhaps Iran. And so that is something that they need to consider.
Okay, Mr. Khan, talking about the other aspects of the upcoming mood, Kashmir situation is also going to be discussed. There would be a meeting of the OIC contact group on Kashmir, and it is also being said that a certain ministerial level resolution would also be passed, and that would be aimed at those elements which are silent on the Kashmir issue, despite knowing the ground reality over there.
Yes, this is something extremely important, especially for Pakistan. And historically, all OIC meetings have had a special meeting on the Kashmir issue. And in the last few years, the Kashmiris have been subjected to all kinds of brutality. And the OIC, in other cases, in other places in the world, has spoken up and supported the cause of human rights. So in this case, it is our job, Pakistan's job, to be able to convince them that it is in our common interest that wherever there is a human rights violation, that we must not only condemn it, but we must take some concrete steps to pressurize India not to continue with such things.
Okay, Mr. Khan, given the fact that Pakistan tabled or moved that resolution to combat Islamophobia on behalf of the OIC at the United Nations General Assembly, clearly Pakistan has taken a lead role when it comes to the challenges being confronted by the Muslim Ummah. Now, when it comes to the Kashmir dispute regarding this OIC summit and then this contact group meeting on the issue of Kashmir, do you think all the OIC countries can actually help Pakistan in order to raise this issue once again, which has already been discussed twice with the help of China at the United Nations Security Council, to bring that back to the agenda of the United Nations General Assembly or the United Nations Security Council for that matter?
Yes, I'm quite confident that Pakistan will be able to convince this conference to make a joint statement at the end of it condemning the Indian atrocities, and it will have a significant impact on the rest of the world.
Okay, Mr. Khan, we'll talk about the theme of this particular moot. Now, that is partnering for unity, justice, and development. A couple of weeks before, we have seen a science diplomacy has been focused. A science journal of the OIC countries is going to be published as well. Now, how do you think, other than Islamophobia, hate speech, the situation in Afghanistan, Kashmir, and Palestine, OIC countries can collaborate in the field of science in particular?
Well, not only science. We're talking about all the possibilities that we can collaborate on. There are obvious differences amongst members of the OIC, but there are certain things which are common where all these interests can converge, and we can do a great deal of work on that. Of course, Islamophobia is something which is common. Racism, these double standards, we need to make the world aware of such things, xenophobia, and then of course science and technology, research and development. These are very, very important because increasingly we want to rely less and less on outsiders for our security. The other important thing is economic cooperation, because recently we have released our new security paradigm, and the economy is a very, very important part of that. So we need to make other members aware how economic cooperation is very, very important even in terms of security. For example, Saudi Arabia today is a country of about 35 million people, is the largest buyer of arms in the world. And so, you know, this is definitely going to have an impact on its economy. So security and the economy is very closely linked. Saudi Arabia's oil is not unlimited. They are trying to move towards alternative sources of, earning foreign exchange, whether it is through tourism or encouraging people to come and do trade and commerce there. So, you know, we need to work very, very closely on the economy. And as I said, in light of what is happening in the Ukraine, it is increasingly important to do that.
So specifically when we talk about economic collaboration, of course, Muslim countries happen to have huge populations. So the rise in population is also related to the security and the smooth running of economy. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. But these are things, which are very difficult to cooperate upon. I mean, population control on a large scale, you must realize that the OIC countries, there is a structural problem in the sense that they exist on several continents. So to have, a united effort in this regard, because there are different kinds of sects in Islam and different rules, and what exactly we can do about population control, I think apart from awareness and creating awareness is definitely something we could maybe make some inroads into. But it is an issue which is going to be rather difficult to handle.
So President Dr. Arif Alvi has been very vocal about controlling the population, and a couple of days before during a seminar he categorically said it is pivotal the population growth, the control is pivotal for the equal distribution of resources among masses. Don't you think this should actually be discussed, and a certain strategy among Muslim countries could be chalked out in the short term and then in the longer term as well?
Well, yes, it should definitely be discussed, because one of the major problems globally today is the vast difference between the rich and the poor. This is going to lead to obviously security problems as well, unrest, and a lack of resources, a lot of heartburn amongst those who are less privileged. So of course this should be highlighted, and this is something that we need to move towards. You see, conferences like this, it is very difficult to get an outcome in 2 days, but as you are saying rightly, we need to create this awareness, and we need to try and devise a plan to move collectively towards this goal.
So what sort of a role do you think the religious scholars from the Muslim countries can play in this regard?
A very, very important role. And countries like Saudi Arabia and countries like Egypt, where we have the Al-Azhar, these are important centers of Islam, and of course Iran, another very important center. So the clergy in these countries needs to be convinced to send out this message to their populations, and from there to the other Islamic countries that very often follow the edicts and fatwas given from these 3 centers. So you are right, it's very important that we need to involve the religious sects or religious leaders, scholars and leaders in this effort, yes.
So, Mr. Khan, coming back to the very important point over which the UN General Assembly has passed a resolution to combat Islamophobia. Now, Prime Minister Imran Khan said now the challenge happens to be the implementation of this resolution. Do you think the foreign ministers, when they'll sit together in this particular mood, they'll think about and try to talk about a future strategy in order to, for this resolution to be implemented?
Yes, absolutely. When all these countries speak with a united voice, and they say that, of course, it's very gratifying to see that the resolution was passed, and that 15th March is going to be a day of Islamophobia every year. It's very gratifying to see that. But the important part is, how is this going to be implemented? And the way that it's going to be implemented is that we all unite together, devise a plan to engage, especially in countries where Islamophobia is on the rise. So these are, I mean, there are countries like France and Switzerland and Austria where the hijab is banned. There are issues of cartoons and things like that. So it is up to us to make a united stand and to be able to convince these people how it will create problems within their societies, because these people now have very large populations of Muslims.
Right, your point is well taken. Unfortunately, we're short of time. Very briefly, Chinese Foreign Minister has been invited to speak as a guest of honor in this moot. So definitely it increases the significance of this moot manifold.
Absolutely. You see, almost all the Islamic countries, their largest trade partner today is China. And China is also willing to support Pakistan on the issue of Islamophobia. Now, this is extremely important. His presence here is a very good omen, and the chance for him to interact with all these leaders in one place is a great opportunity, and I'm very glad that Pakistan has been able to provide, as the Foreign Minister said, a bridge, to have unity, a bridge during this amongst all the participants.
Right, your point is well taken. Pakistan is of course going to act as a bridge in order to create unity amongst the Muslim Ummah, and clearly it has taken the lead role. It is going to be hosting the second time the Council of Foreign Ministers of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Pakistan. 3 months before, under this very moot, a humanitarian for Afghanistan was also established, and the Kashmir situation and the Islamophobia and hate speech are also going to be discussed. Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, former ambassador, thank you very much for being at Perspective today. We really appreciate your time. With this, we come to the end of today's show. Until the next episode, it's goodbye. Take good care of yourselves.